Super Bowl 58 is this Sunday, and though the Bengals will not be playing in it, we have a connection right here in Loveland, Ohio. He has a Super Bowl ring earned in that San Francisco 49ers win over the Bengals in Super Bowl XVI. Yes, he coached on the other sideline that day in Pontiac, Michigan. He was a pioneer in strength and conditioning coaching and has coached in 3 major leagues, including the NFL, NBA, and Major League Baseball. He has ties to both teams in this year's Super Bowl and is the brother of an NFL Hall of Fame head coach. He is Al Vermeil. Hello, everybody. I'm Chuck Gibson, and it is my pleasure to welcome you and Al to this Super Bowl 58 Sports Special Edition of Loveland Beacon Talks. Now I'm pleased to welcome our special guest. Al Vermeil, welcome to Loveland Beacon Talks, Sports Special Super Bowl Week Edition. Thank you for joining us.
That's my pleasure. Glad to be here.
And for you at home, you just heard my introduction, but Al, you are uniquely qualified in more ways than one, but what we want to do is focus on the Super Bowl and your experiences. So Al Vermeil, as a coach, a strength and conditioning coach with the San Francisco 49ers, back in 1982, when they won that Super Bowl. We won't say who they beat. But tell us a little bit, starting with that, tell us a little bit, about your experience first and foremost, and then let's talk about how the team gets ready for that one-game championship.
Well, 4 years before that, I was coaching high school football. So I coached a couple teams in the playoffs. Unfortunately, we didn't win because of my coaching, but outside that. So obviously, it's a huge change for me.
Yeah.
And the Super Bowl was big, but it's not like today. It's media hype. But, it was a process. We started the season not very well. I think we lost the opening game to Atlanta, or Detroit. I think we lost, maybe not the opening season, but we lost it in Detroit. And Coach Walsh noticed when you kicked the ball on that turf would bounce. And I'll get back to that. Don't let me forget why that's important.
All right.
So then we got on a roll. Montana was coming in his own, and we had the late Dwight Clark. And so the team got on a roll, and we had gotten Fred Dean from San Diego about the 3rd or 4th game in the season. I think his first start might have been against Dallas, and we beat Dallas very bad. And we had acquired Jack Reynolds.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think.
Those are some names right there.
I think Linville Elliott, who had passed away, was on that team. And he just put all the pieces. And here's the thing. Our draft choice was, I believe, it went Ronnie Lott, Eric Wright, Carlton Williams, and I can't remember, but in the first 3 rounds or 4 rounds, we drafted DBs. I think we're the only team to ever start 3 rookies
in the defensive backfield.
And, of course, Lott ended up being all pro.
Well, I was going to say Ronnie Lott's a Hall of Famer.
Oh, great guy. You couldn't meet a nicer guy. So all those kids came around, and they gelled during the season. And I think we went 13-3, and I think the only game we lost after we went on that roll was to Cleveland in the rain. And their kicker, now I could be wrong on this, but it was Matt Barr. And he, I think, had kicked earlier in the season because Ray Worshing was hurt.
Right.
And then we let him go, and then Cleveland picked him up. I think I've got that story right.
It was Matt Barr at Cleveland. You definitely have that correct. Yeah.
And he was with us. Might have been the next year he was with us, but at some point I remember him telling the story. He felt bad about it.
Well, you know who was kicking here in Cincinnati? Chris Barr.
Yeah. So anyway, and we got on a roll, and we faced in the first round we faced New York, the Giants, and of course they had the great outside linebacker. LT.
Oh, yeah.
And if I remember correctly, Bill Walsh had, and our offensive line coach and coaches developed a little different pass blocking scheme. And I remember right, the left guard, Johnny airs, if their inside backer didn't come, he would help pick up LT. Now, this is, 40-something years ago, so my memory...
Well, yeah, that's 43 years ago.
But
so.
I know they did...
I mean, that was ultimately the year of Super Bowl LVIII, and we're at 58 coming up this weekend.
But I remember the key thing is they were able to keep him off Montana.
Yeah.
And then we played well and won, and of course... Then the next week we played Dallas, and of course we had embarrassed them earlier in the year, and so we go into that game, and it's nip and tuck, and I believe Montana. What separated Joe Montana from the others was his coolness and the ability. I believe he threw 2 interceptions before he threw the pass to Clark, not right in a row,
right,
and. A lot of times, as you're a baseball player, it's like a pitcher. If he gives up a home run or has a bad first inning, he's done. Joe wasn't that way. And, he makes a great play to Clark.
He had that ability to forget the bad
Clark
play.
Makes a great play. Right. And he was a wonderful guy to work with.
Well, real quick, Al, talking about, as you said, you guys, the San Francisco 49ers, in that season, had embarrassed Dallas earlier in the year. How does that play when I think it's hard to beat a team twice, period.
Yeah, and if you were a competitor, anybody out there playing sports, if you were embarrassed one time by a team, you're either going to do two things. You're either going out, we can't beat them, or we want revenge. Now, that's the Dallas Cowboys, so they're going out wanting to beat us.
Right.
And of course, you'd have the great Tom Landry, great.
Well, that's ultimately what an incredible coaching matchup. Nobody really knew right then how big, because we knew Tom Landry and his legacy, but Bill Walsh he was like the new kid on the block, so to speak.
Yeah, and Coach Walsh didn't, if I'm the right numbers, but he got his first head coaching job after he left Washington High School in 1959 to go to Cal with Marv Levy. And I lived right down the street from Washington High School, and the guy that replaced him, the late Jim Ingram, was a great friend. For 2 years, came up and coached for me at Moreau. But, that just shows some people should have been thinking, missed the boat. So it was a great matchup, and at the end of the game, everybody knows the story about the catch. But what they don't know, after I can't remember, it's Too Tall Jones tackles Joe, and Dwight Clark tells the story. They can verify it on YouTube. Jones says, "You just beat America's team," and Joe looked at him and said, "Well, you can sit home and watch the Super Bowl with the rest of America." and Clark tells that story.
That's a whole different kind of trash talk. Just being clear about it.
Yeah, we had a 2 weeks in between, so we trained at our facility. The guys came in and trained, and then by the time we got to Detroit. Another interesting story, Coach Walsh had to go to Washington to receive the Coach of the Year award. And when we got off the bus, I didn't see it, but he was dressed in a bellman's uniform. And the guy says, "Don't take my bag." And they didn't realize he had you may not know this about him, but he could be the funniest guy you ever. I mean, he could keep you in stitches because he would tell some stories. He was just funny. And then that kind of broke, and they went there and got prepared that week. He did talk to my brother Dick because Dick and him are personal friends.
Sure.
Bill was a grad assistant when Dick was playing at San Jose State.
Well, and for the folks listening right now, when you're hearing this, we're talking with Al Vermeil, and so when he says my brother Dick, we're talking about Dick Vermeil, who has his own legacy and, of course, his own bust in the Football Hall of Fame. So Dick Vermeil, former coach of the Philadelphia Eagles and so on. But continue with that story. I didn't want to interrupt, but just so people know.
Coach talked to different people, and he did a good job of not only keeping the moment, but not wound so tight. And we're on the way to the Super Bowl, and there's 2 buses. One bus went early. Well, I'm on the second bus with Montana, Coach is on it. Well, we are delayed from George Bush's motorcade. And Joe asked Bill if he could play a song. and I can't remember if it was Kenny Loggins' "This Is It" or Queen's "We Are the Champions." One of the two.
Right.
I think it was one.
Yeah.
So Bill said fine. And then we get there and everything proceeds, and and of course
now on that's the bus trip from
the hotel to the stadium.
Hotel
and that stadium is not there anymore.
Right.
So,
well, that was the Pontiac Silverdome in Detroit, where Super Bowl XVII was.
And one of the interesting stories is we're on the goal line. We only have 10 guys for some of it.
Yeah.
Well, the young man that made the tackle that saved the game against Alexander was Danny Buns. I had coached against him in high school. He went to Oakmont High School, and I was an assistant at Castle Robley. This was all in the Sacramento area. And Danny had a shoulder problem that year, and I helped him rehab it. Yeah. And so it was interesting. He makes probably one of the. It's not looked like at the catch, but it's probably one of the most important tackles in 49er history, if you want to look at it on the big screen. So basically, those are some of the things that went on. Also, when I was there, I had bought my son a Lionel train, and it didn't work right, Magnetrack. Well, Mount Clemens was only an hour drive. Yeah. And we all had cars, so in between, I drove up there, and the guy fixed it for me, and he said, I have a brother that had, I can't remember he had a serious disease.
Yeah.
Something like multiple sclerosis. I could be wrong. And he said, would you get me a football signed by Joe? So I got it and sent it to him. And I'd call him every year. Well, about 3 years after that, I called him. I said, how's your brother doing? He said, Al, he passed away. But you know what he had under his arm when he died? That football.
Joe Montana.
And that really made me touch my heart, made me feel good.
That
is one of the real special stories. All the rings and all the money and all the glamour, and like Lombardi says, it goes. It's yesterday. But,
well, it is the relationships, isn't it?
And it's relationships with the players. And when you see him, when Dick was inducted, I saw some of the old 49er players, Dwayne Board and Keenan Turner, and I saw a young man that played for Dick, Freddie Miller, and I had they sent him to me. His agent was the same as Horace and Scotty's, and to do some things prepping them for when they do the testing. That I think the biggest thing people would maybe surprised, maybe not, is that these people, you're not coaching a machine. And I tell you, you're not coaching a robot. You have to look what they are emotion of each player that you deal with and understand them. They're human beings. They're not machines. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to have up and down days. And in my position, where you're not on the field and the whole group's right there, you really have to understand that. And in dealing with people, I think the most important thing is being able to get your message across in such a way they understand it, and especially today. I was talking about the Super Bowl. I've got mixed feelings because obviously I'm an old 49er. I mean, I remember I saw my first football game pro game of 1956 with my brother Dick, my dad, and a friend of the family's. We sat in the small end zone at Kezar Stadium, paid $5 for the tickets, and they played the Detroit Lions, who had Bobby Lane, Leon Hart, and the 49ers had the $1 million backfield. Y.A. Tittle, Joe Perry, John Henry Johnson, and Hugh McElhaney. The only backfield were all four in the Hall of Fame.
Wow. Yeah.
So
and I didn't even know that. I think I know something, but I did not know that.
So anyway,
our listeners probably just learned that a whole bunch of them.
Well, and when the 49ers beat Detroit this past playoff, they mentioned the 57 game where Detroit came back. I was a young kid listening to the game because I got to go to a game with my 7th grade teacher would take me, Mr. Jones, if I had tickets. Yeah. And when I'm at the Super Bowl in '82, I hear, "Hey Al, hey Al." It was Mr. Jones. And then there was
the 7th grade teacher.
Yeah, and
all
then
these
there
years
was
later.
One of my receivers from Moreau, Mike West, yelled at me. You get some small, but it's, I've kind of probably gotten off the beaten track.
Well, that's okay, because you know what? You stayed really on the track more than we would think, because that was talking about the relationships that are built. Those are lasting relationships, even for you as a kid with your 7th grade teacher, going to football games.
It was great.
And then evolving into being a part of the Super Bowl as the strength and conditioning coach with the 49ers.
The interesting thing, I had said something in my elementary, which was 1 through 8 in those days.
Yeah.
Mr. Drew had something where I had said I'm going to coach for the 49ers or play for him, and showed it to my mother before we went to the Super Bowl.
Wow.
You know.
Dream come true.
Well, you know what? I never planned any. People always ask, well, did you plan that? I said, no, I just planned to be the best I could be. In fact, I never wanted to leave high school football coaching.
Yeah.
I loved it. But there was a point where I had to see if I could do it at the next level. And, and I was only 34 when I took the job, so there were players as old as me.
Well, and I know you don't want me to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway, but you're something of a pioneer in terms of the strength and conditioning, coaching, and I mean, that's a part of every team's coaching staff today, but you were the first with the San Francisco 49ers.
Yes, I was fortunate.
And we're going to sidetrack for a real, way off track here for a minute. But you were the first ever in the NBA with the Chicago Bulls.
I guess so. I hate to use that word first. I actually remember sometime in the mid-'50s, the 49ers brought some guy in to test their strength. And I can remember reading Red Hickey's comment. He said, I could do as much on the squats as this particular player. But there was a little book. I think the guy was from not University of Illinois, like, there's another, that Illinois State or someone of those.
Yeah.
But officially, I guess I was the first for the 49ers.
Well, yeah, and again, it evolved into where, not to say that teams didn't use somebody or have strength programs.
There were very few.
But ultimately having a coach on the staff that's helping guide these players with programs for their strength and conditioning.
One of the ones that did a great job was the Pittsburgh Steelers. Oh God! And I cannot remember the gentleman's name that came in there.
I was going to hit the button and say, when you say Pittsburgh Steelers, we growl.
But they had the person they brought in there, Paul Urim, and he worked on the flexibility. And the story was that all the Pittsburgh defensive linemen of the Steel Curtain could do the splits.
Wow!
And I can't remember.
I remember hearing that story.
Lou Rickey would come in, they'd bring him in, and he'd work with him. But with the 49ers, I was one of the first, and then there's a couple other great ones, and 3 other great ones that came. Well, Bob Ward was already there at Dallas. He's passed away. We did a great job. My good personal friend Al Miller was at Denver with Reeves, New York, and Atlanta. And then Johnny Parker was there at New York with Parcell, and was with Gruden when they won down in Tampa Bay.
Wow!
So, but
that's a pretty good stretch from Park.
It is part of a lot. Everybody's got someone today.
Bill Parcells to John Gruden.
Yeah.
But let's fast forward a bit, because again we're heading. I mean, this, as you and I sit here and record this, it is Tuesday of Super Bowl week. We've got the Kansas City Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers have arrived in Las Vegas, where the Super Bowl will be played on Sunday. Tell me a little bit, from your own experience, what's that like, that week leading up to that game day?
That's a great.
Can you share?
And like I said, I have mixed feelings, because I have a good friend of the head strength coach with the Chiefs. I don't want to use the word mentor, because that means I've assisted him.
Yeah.
And
who's that? Who's the strength coach with the Chiefs? I put you on a spot. But
Ryan Reynolds.
Okay.
He's about 41, does a great job. He brought me in this spring, and I got to meet Patrick and work with some of the players, and I got to meet Andy Reid.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, I needled him. He was a BYU guy, and I'm a Utah State guy.
Well, you know what? And since we were talking about like Landry and Bill Walsh, and your own brother Dick Vermeil,
Andy Reid's in that same class.
Andy Reid's a coaching icon.
He's going to be in the Hall of Fame.
Oh, for sure.
But when you ask about that week,
well, he followed your brother's footsteps, because he went to Philadelphia,
and he did a great job there.
Yeah.
It shows you how wise Philadelphia was.
We won't. Yeah, they've done well.
Yeah, but
they were good then. Good choice.
Why would you not keep him there?
Right.
Well,
that was a oops. Well, they went.
Sometimes
with losing Andy Reid from the Eagles' standpoint, letting Andy Reid go, yeah, they went on a downturn.
Well,
but they've recovered.
Here's the thing sometimes, from a football standpoint, and looking at the history of the NFL, sometimes you get guys with a lot of money, and they've been successful in one thing. They don't know what the hell's going on in the other thing, but they think they do.
I got you.
And they make irrational decisions and don't realize you're not going to win the Super Bowl every year. You're not going to go there. Then there's so many things that dictate your success. Bill Walsh, we were 3-13 and 6-10 the first 2 years. Would that have been smart to get rid of him? No. We didn't have the players. It takes time to build an order. And I think the hardest thing to do.
Well, if he went from 3-13, or
yeah, but I'm just saying.
At least he was improving.
I'm just saying, look at the modern owner. And Eddie DiBartolo was a great owner, just like Mr. Reinsdorf was great, and Jerry Krause with the Bulls. But there are so many things that go. The injuries. There's a call, and before they had instant replay, there were calls that changed games around.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
So
if you ask me, they still have calls that they've missed even with the replay.
Well, yeah. And I lost my train of thought there.
Talking about the ownership.
And what it's interesting about ownership, in their other business, when they made a mistake, it wasn't a million people weren't watching them make it, or more.
Right.
It's in the corporate board. Oh, we shouldn't have bought that. Ooh, that company went. And I just think it's a lot harder job to do today because there's free agency, and now they've got limits on how long you can practice, which I think is ridiculous. And I think that's part of the problem of injuries. I heard the great Jake LaMotta say you got to learn to take a punch. Now, you don't have to go out there, but you have to practice at somewhat the tempo you're going to play at.
Yeah.
And if you don't, but it's a difficult job. And that week, I really just observed what went on. They went about their business. I mean, I don't remember going, "Ooh, today this, that." They just had the interviews and went about their business and got ready to play. And the interesting thing is Jack Reynolds, when he goes down to eat pre-game meal. He does this all the time. He's in his game uniform.
Oh, wow.
And we're in the elevator with Jack, and my wife's in there. And he says, Jack, well, good Super Bowl. And he had played in the one, I believe, a year or two before with the Rams. And he said, about making this money. He said, the taxes will cost me. He was a piece of work.
Straightforward.
But I don't remember the week like being all amped up. And maybe I didn't grasp the moment. I'll be honest with you. Maybe I was too dumb and young. I was only 37 at the time.
Well, when we started talking today, even before we turned the recorder on and began talking for everybody to listen, you talked about how much has changed. So when you say that week leading up to the Super Bowl then they did the interviews and they practiced and they got ready for the game. Today, the hyperbole, the hype leading up to it, the teams know it's a distraction.
Well, yeah, the other thing is, I should quantify what I said. I mean, I was just a strength coach. I wasn't Bill Walsh or Chuck Studley, who's from Cincinnati, who did a one of the things that people don't realize that year is Chuck turned our defense around and deserves a lot of credit that I sometimes think is bypassed. Who did a great job with our defense. So I was down the line guy. I'm not someone all the press wants to talk to, and I guess the year before my brother went to Super Bowl, I was more nervous for his than I was mine. A great story. We're going to Dick's Super Bowl, and the limo we're in breaks down. Well, my dad was one of the great mechanics machine. He's in the Sprint Car Hall of Fame in Knoxville. He gets out and fixes the car, which
I forget. Yeah, your dad was in the auto racing world.
Oh, yeah, sprint car. Yeah,
I forgot.
My other brother Stan drove.
I forgot.
Built race cars, but
well, there's some athleticism in that.
Well, my dad was a great football player, and my brother Stan was a good football player.
Well, hey, on the strength and conditioning part, because now it's been 40 years over that space of time. What do you see as the differences? How do you compare frankly, how do you compare the strength of the players 40 years ago to the strength today?
I haven't been around. I don't know. I'd have to be with a team for a while.
Well, just a quick view.
I would say they have to be stronger because I see some great jobs being done in college.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some. Even I think it was one of the Dakota schools. I don't know, it was South or North Dakota does a great job. The schools are all doing a good job. Yeah. They're doing a really good job. The biggest thing I've seen strength conditioning a little bit, and if there's a young strength coach, heed my words. Be careful of they just invented it. You know what I tell them?
It's been around for a long time.
Yeah, I see things I did in Moreau High School in 1976. And the thing you got to realize, it's a human being's not a computer. You're not getting someone who's an upgrade. There isn't no upgrades. Jim Thorpe had the same parts that LeBron James or Joe Montana. And in 100 years, they're going to say LeBron James had the same part as who the next superstar or Patrick Mahomes had. And I see some of the times I do a lot of gimmick. Not a lot. Sometimes I see gimmick, and I'm looking at it. Just because an exercise is difficult, they have one where they lay on the floor. They call it the Turkish get-up, and you got a kettlebell in your hand. You stand. Oh, it's difficult.
What's the benefit?
Yeah, you're not the whole key to sports is how much force you can put into the ground and how fast you get it out. So the people that are more explosive spend less time on the ground and put more force out. Look at golf. You know why they hit it so far? They're putting more force in the ground. And if you see anything there's where they use the force plates for golf, and it's how you use that pressure, they call it. They used to call it shifting your weight. So it's how much pressure you put towards your backswing, but how soon you get it back over to the other side and how much you're pushing. That determines a great amount of your swing speed.
It's transfer, right?
Yeah, it's all. So if you're doing an exercise that doesn't promote that, now it may not be the actual jumping off the ground, but a simple exercise, squat, to give you some force, or Olympic lift, and then you got plyometrics. I started doing plyometrics in 1976 with football because the guy up on the hills, my best friend Don Shue, was a world famous jump coach, and I didn't know it. He was at a school at Cal State Hayward with no scholarships, and at one time had coached more 7-foot high jumpers than anybody in America.
Wow.
He's still, so we started doing things like we'd get on a bench and step off a bench and strike a bag. And we did running downhill, uphill. We did a lot of things they're doing today, and I didn't invent them. I just looked at what stepping off the box. I said, well, I was a high school shot putter, and I read where they were stepping off a box and throwing a shot. Well, I said, if that helps a shot putter, that's got to help a football player. So we just stepped off and hit a bag. Yeah. But that's the other thing. If you want to be a really good strength coach, spend time with track and field, Olympic lifting coach, and go learn to coach a team sport. I don't care if it's your kids. Because if you can't handle groups, I see coaches that can coach one guy at a time. You've got to. When I was a grad assistant at Kansas State University for Vince Gibson, you had to coach on the run, and he was like Coach Bryant had a tower on there, and I was a GA, and boy, I was really aware where he was. Yeah. But you have to coach on the run. You can't give a dissertation, and that's what I see They go to, hey. You got to,
quick points.
Well, example, I was at Kansas City there, and the young coaches were surprised. I stepped right in and coached. The players didn't know who the hell I was, Who's this old bald-headed guy here? He couldn't have played football unless it was 1902 or something. But I was working with the players, and I gave the player, they kind of asked me why did you use that verbiage? Suggestion. Because the player would do something, he'd look at me and I said, can I make a suggestion? Try this. And he said, why'd you use that term? I said, they didn't know who the hell I was. Now, one of the coaches there, fortunately, was Andy Heck, who was with the Bears, and he had a back injury, and we assisted him. Recovery. So he had told someone. And I said, they don't know me from anybody. So if I go in and say, you need to do it this way, but I gave the guy a suggestion, as soon as I said suggestion, he's listening to me.
Right.
It's a different day and age.
Yeah.
But you have to learn to communicate. If you can't communicate your message, I don't care, how smart you are.
Well, it has been great having you here share this. Before we wrap up, I know you already said you got the mixed emotions. With your history with San Francisco, and you've got a dear friend that's the strength coach with the Chiefs, and you had some.
And I knew the strength coach before that with the Chiefs.
Well, and so you've got a connection to Kansas City, you got a connection to San Francisco, but I'm not going to let you off the hook that easy. So who are you picking? If you had to pick, who are you saying?
I would have to say Kansas City, because they've been there more times. They're going to be able to handle all the hype. Patrick's been there all the times. This is great pressure. Brock Purdy's only been in the league 2 years.
Right.
I mean, it's not that the 49ers can't win, but I think they're going to have to play a more perfect game than the Chiefs. The first thing they're going to have to do is find a way to stop the run, because Detroit, one of the things, Detroit didn't run the ball in the second half. It's amazing. You watch, and all of a sudden, they stop a running play twice. Now they throw all the time. But they'll throw incompletions, but they keep complete. I think the other key maybe is using Brock Purdy underneath the center more than the gun. And the commentators made this point. He cut his teeth on running McCaffrey and play action. The play action off the gun, I don't think is as good, because you're back there, everybody can see it. And I think that he'd be more effective that way. But I'm not Bill Walsh, and I'm not Dick Vermeil, and I'm not Andy Reid, so I'm just giving you an old veer.
And for that matter, Shanahan.
Yeah, I'm not any of those guys. I mean, when I was high school coach, we ran the veer. The forward pass was. One time I said I was going to open it up, and we went 4 for 7.
Well, so anyway, I think that was a fair pick. You're saying the Chiefs, not that San Francisco can't beat them, but you like.
You know what? And someone like I like to say, I can't win and I can't lose. So if the Chiefs win, I'm happy for them, but I'm bad for the 49ers. The 49ers, because that was my old team, and I loved the organization. It was great. I'm happy for them, sad for the, so I'm in a no-win situation.
Well, I am so grateful for you visiting with us today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you, Dick. And we're going to do it again, right?
If Chuck Studley hears this, I hope you're doing well, Coach.
Fair enough.
We don't win that '82 Super Bowl without you turning that defense around.
That's a big thing. Well, thank you again for joining us.
You're welcome.
Great. Thanks for joining us today, Al. I look forward to having you back again to share more stories of championships past and present. Until then, I'm Chuck Gibson saying thanks for listening here on Loveland Beacon. Loveland Beacon Talks is a presentation of Loveland Beacon Digital Media and Gibson Communications, LLC.